Hello, my rockers. Gene Willow here. I'm doing another interview for my blog Escapist Advisor. Today I'm talking with Nigel Wingrove, the man thanks to whom many of us have discovered our favorite cult classic exploitation films, because I'm sure that many of you have watched them as releases by Redemption Films, a famous label that specializes in exploitation cinema. Nigel Wingrove is also a director who shot famous films, Visions of Ecstasy, that was banned for blasphemy, and Sacred Flesh. Nigel is also a designer, a writer, a man of multiple talents. Hello, Nigel.
Hi, hello. Hi. Hello from
How are
England.
you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay, so let's get down to business, to the first question. How did you discover exploitation films the first time in your life and fell in love with the genre?
Well, it wasn't that I sort of discovered exploitation. I liked horror films, and basically, when obviously I grew up, I was a teenager in the '70s. So when I first started going to, well, I was into music, but the other thing was was going to the cinema, and I liked all sorts of things, but I particularly liked Hammer horror, so that was my introduction, if you like, to exploitation. Uh, so it was essentially it was Hammer horror and films like that. And when I got to art school, I saw Tinto Brass's Salon Kitty and The Damned and films like Night Porter, things like that, which had a more sort of decadent style. So the combination of Hammer and then into that slightly more decadent style, and then obviously the punk thing was all going on around while I was doing that. So I was also producing a fanzine. By the time I got to London, which would be the very late '70s, '79 into '80, I was going to, I'd also, there was cinemas in London like the Screen on the Green that would show sort of Divine's films and things like that, John Waters stuff. So, my taste sort of got more eclectic, but I had no desire, or even didn't even cross my mind, to be quite honest, that I would end up distributing those films. It was just they were just kind of the films I liked, at that stage in my life.
Did you distinguish exploitation films with small budget from mainstream horror films?
Not well. Obviously, a big Hollywood film like The Thing, which I think was '82, wasn't it? Stuff like that. Well, that was always more mainstream, or more Euro stuff. Had a different feel, and of course, in the background at that time, there was the video nasty things were going on in the UK, because videos were coming out that weren't they were exempt in the UK from censorship, because the law as it stood only applied to films in the cinema, because obviously when the law was written, video didn't exist. So that was a kind of background. But at the same time, in my own life, I mean, I'd come up to London to seek my fortune, if you like. So I was working in magazines, trying to get jobs in magazines, which is what I was doing. And then I ended up working in Paris, funny enough, and working on French magazines. And so film was in the background, but it wasn't, it was something I liked, but it wasn't part of my life, if that makes sense. In the sense, I wasn't, I was a consumer of films the same way that most people are, and I'd go to the cinemas to see them, or I'd see them or I began to see them on video. But I had my main focus in life was actually life, if you know what I mean. At that stage, I was busy, working on magazines, trying to get ahead. I had a very tempestuous relationship with a French girl, which while I was in Paris, and so I was basically the wider world was what was occupying my time at that time, if that makes sense, so film was in the background, but it wasn't so big in my life the way that it had been in the '70s and the early '80s, when going to the cinema and stuff was something I did a lot. I sort of was more interested in going out, getting on my life, going to bars, restaurants, just generally. I was more of a social animal in that period, I think is the best way of putting it.
Okay. Do you have any favorite films and favorite directors ever?
Well, I've got lots. I mean, actually, funny enough, Salon Kitty was one. I mean, that was a big thing for me because I'm jumping forward now. But when I came to start Redemption, and I'll explain, if you like, how that came about. But when I sort of circumstances pushed me in a way to I ended up, life pushed me in a way that I started Redemption. I wrote a list of the films that I wanted, and there were kind of things that, well, the very first X film I ever saw was Virgin Witch, so that was right on the top of my list. Salon Kitty was, because I loved that film, and it wasn't available, and I just thought, well, that's the film I want, Killer Nun, which was Anita Ekberg's epic, was another one which had been was also sort of a kind of video nasty. I mean, it wasn't the official video nasty, but it was tied up in all of that. So I suppose, I mean, I have a lot of those kind of sleazy. I like Bruno Mattei. I'm a big fan of Bruno Mattei, and films like The Other Hell, which is a nunsploitation one. Ken Russell's The Devils was a big thing for me. Clockwork Orange, Straw Dogs. The 70s were a funny time for film because it was a very exciting decade, I think, for films, because a lot of those, I mean, obviously they've dated now, but there was a period which I'm very pleased I lived through that, when the cinema was like an assault, and you did go, Clockwork Orange, when that came out, or the Exorcist came out, or Straw Dogs came out. I mean, all of those films or the Antichrist actually was a kind of poor man's Exorcist, but I thought, which I thought was better. Funnily enough, I enjoyed that one more. They were just coming out all the time, and it was a very exciting period, So all of that influenced me, the whole. Sorry, there's my phone's going. That all influenced me a lot.
Okay, next question. Currently, you are busy with your project Redemption TV that you launched in March this year, 2020. Could you please tell me about this project, what it is, and what is special about it?
Well, Redemption TV there's two things with that. One is I had around about 2005 to 2006, 2007, we actually had a company called Redemption TV, which was funded, and the original premise behind that and the investors that were involved was it would be a channel that was like an alternative culture. We'd have alternative films, if you like, or exploitation movies, alternative music, fashion, lifestyles, and that was the whole thing. But like a lot of these things, when you get involved with other people, what they want and what you want, they're not always going parallel. You can diverge, and they they very rapidly wanted to move from the vision I had for it into essentially creating a live music channel. And we tried to kind of marry the two, which for initially, with music, film, and stuff like that. And then it very, very quickly became also the type of music they wanted was much more mainstream rock. So that all basically I broke away. We separated, and they changed the name of the channel to Rock World, and it ended as a project for me. So then fast forward to now, when the pandemic kicked in, and then like the shops, the retail side in the UK, all got shut down and everything. It was quite obvious to me that what had been a kind of a problem already with people buying physical media, sales, are slowly dropping, that I should do something else, or at least I should have an online presence. We'd always had some of our films available for digital thing, but I decided I needed to do it properly, so I revisited the, Redemption TV as a sort of brand, and set about, creating a proper website, done properly with all the streaming facilities in. But I also revisited the concept that I'd had originally, because that was what I wanted to do, which is to have a channel that would have, film, music, culture and stuff. Now, at the moment, we're primarily film, but I am trying to bring in, we will bring in over the coming months, more sort of related cultural stuff. So it's a slow process, because there's a lot of competition out there with streaming channels now, and we haven't got a big budget or anything, so it's a case of, but it is growing. I mean, when the number of streams are going up every month, and we're getting interest, and we're adding 2 new films every single month, so it's growing.
Nice. So I know that you have big plans for expansion of this project to feature not only films on it in future, but also sex, politics, music, and maybe something else. It's saying coming soon: culture, art, fashion, music, sex, and politics. So could you please tell me about these plans in more detail? In what form are you planning to feature these items on the site?
Well, there's 2 things. One is in terms of like a cultural section, if you like. It's we're approaching kind of more obscure bands, musicians, stuff like that, to see what content they might have available that we can utilize on the channel, or we can make things with them. So we'll try and cover, I suppose, those more sort of areas of music or creativity in the music scene that doesn't get, I mean, it's all there now on the internet, but we're obviously trying to put it, bring in some stuff and put it on our site. But it would cover, I suppose, elements of black metal or neo folk or noise or experimental stuff, to just be things that we felt would be interesting. We don't have too much. We don't, obviously, we're not a music channel, but we do want. So I'll be looking at kind of just interesting, quirky, strange sort of, strange is the wrong word, but stuff that's just a bit more unusual that we think would fit in with Redemption or our audience. In terms of, again, the same would apply with fashion. It's not necessarily to be underground. It's not necessarily to be gothic particularly. It's just where we can find things or people that are doing things we think are interesting or a bit quirky or a bit, a bit left field, if you like, that are just a bit different, that we would approach them or try and get programs or other stuff that they've made, or we could interview them or things. So just build up. The same would come to sort of sexual politics, or it's just stuff that's a bit more interesting, a bit quirky, not particularly, we haven't got an agenda with it. It's just stuff that we think would fit in with the channel, that's kind of, somebody who's visiting our site regularly, or if we go become a subscription service, that would fit in with the sort of content that people we think that they would be interested in. So it's something that would run in parallel with the films. I mean, the channel obviously is primarily a film channel, but having related culture, I think, would be interesting, or at least I feel it would be.
On your website and a few other resources talking about your projects, I've seen the expression alternative lifestyle. What does this mean to you personally, and is your own lifestyle alternative in relation to traditional one? And if yes, then how?
I mean, in terms of describing something as alternative, I mean, it's generally has an accepted meaning. If you say, "Oh, I'm into alternative culture or alternative this," it just means you're looking at stuff that's slightly outside of the mainstream. So if you think mainstream is here, then alternative is sort of running alongside of it. I have to say, though, I think increasingly alternative is slightly not misleading, but it's changed in the sense that the alternative culture is almost mainstream in some ways now, because it's very wide, it's a very broad church, if that makes sense. And so I don't think alternative is as alternative as it used to be, but nonetheless, that's what I mean by it. It just means it's content that's slightly, how do I put it, away from the mainstream, because the mainstream's covered. So we're trying to cover things that would be slightly different from the mainstream. And in terms of my own personal life, I mean, I've never tried to be alternative, and I don't particularly think of myself as an alternative person, but my life has been quite odd. So in a sense, I have existed my life, I suppose, in ways that are definitely outside of mainstream, a normal mainstream existence, if that makes sense, but I've not consciously tried to do that. I think that's probably the best way of doing it. I just think circumstances have seemed to have meant that I've always gone slightly outside of the norm, if that kind of makes sense.
Okay. Most of your works, at least the ones started from the 90s, have something to do with violence, blasphemy, perversion, or fornication. Let's just look at the titles of a few of your projects. Satanic Sluts, The Art of the Nasty, Scum Nation. Uh, then a book exploring the design in the Third Reich. I assume that individually each work has something particularly interesting to it, but looking at all of your projects as a whole, I see an obvious trend that shows that you gravitate to what is normally frowned upon in the modern society, and always choose topics that are normally associated with something strongly negative. Why?
Uh, they are. I don't know. You're not the first person who's asked that, obviously, but they've. It's not a grand. It's not a plan. It's never been a plan of mine. But I tend to gravitate towards certain subjects that interest me, and then things happen. In the religious thing and the blasphemy thing, I kind of, if I go back to the 80s, which is before I started Redemption, I was working in magazines, which is what I loved. That was my big love. And I was an art director, so I'd create images for the magazines. And I was looking for a vehicle by which I could, where I could really sort of do what I wanted. And I was looking for magazines, and I found a really obscure, really underground magazine called Skin 2, which is a fetish magazine. In those days, it was really underground and was almost like a fanzine, because it was so tiny. And I rang the guy up, a man called Tim Woodward, who was the editor of it, and asked him if I could redesign it for him. And he said yes. And I did. And that meant that was my first thing. So I was able to start creating erotic images around the sort of SM scene, if you like. And I did. And again, I got in, how should I put it? I had to move away because I started creating, I did some images, which cost me a lot of money at the time because it's before Photoshop. But I did some images with X-rays. So I had these models with all this jewelry on and stuff. But then I got a specialist printer, and I got all these X-rays, and then we got X-rays in the right position of the body, and he ghosted the skull and the bones in the print, so you could see the body through the print. Anyway, and Skin 2 sort of, they published some of them, but then they said they felt they were too much like dead bodies, and they reminded me of sort of Auschwitz and stuff, which was not my intention. But nonetheless, at that point, I felt that obviously Skin 2 wasn't my magazine. So although I was creating these images, obviously I was doing essentially what I wanted to do, but it wasn't my magazine. So I went away. But that was what set me off, really, because people kept saying to me, "Oh, you should make these images move," which is why I started moving to film. I made a film called Axel, which was with a musician called Daniel Dax, and it was a girl being led through a dream. And I sold it on video and stuff and made some money. And then I made Visions of Ecstasy. But I was exploring what I wanted to do. In Visions was really, really loosely inspired by a statue Bernini did of St. Teresa, the Ecstasy of St. Teresa. but it was never my intention to make a blasphemous film. It just, the censors in the UK decided it was. Nobody else did, but they did, and that got me in trouble, and it pushed me sideways because there was a recession going on, so magazine work stopped, and I moved sideways into doing films and things. But so all the things that interest me have come about. They're not planned. I mean, now I'm older and I can, I am working on I'm actually working on some art stuff at the moment, some big paintings and things. But the subjects that interest me, I've always been interested in. I mean, my favorite period in history actually was the French Revolution. But I also like the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Cultural Revolution and the period of the Third Reich, because all of those were times of great social upheaval. So that's always been they're the things that attract me most, because they're kind of, I suppose, again, it's when normal culture breaks down, and those have always been that's always been the sort of period that I find most interesting. And funny enough, at the moment, it's almost like we're living through a period which hasn't finished yet, where that's kind of going on a bit in society at the moment, which interests me, because it's closer to what the kind of world that I've always gravitated to. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer there, and I'm not sure if it completely answers it, but that's roughly where I'm coming from on that.
Yes, I noticed that your first films, they are like more artistic, and then starting from the 90s, your projects, they are like more aggressive, more provocational.
Well, there's an element of truth in that, but that's primarily because of Satanic Sluts, for instance. That wasn't an art project in the sense. It was, it came about.
Entertainment.
Pardon?
Rather entertainment than art.
Well, kind of, yeah. I started the Satanic Sluts around 2002, 2003, and it was Redemption's always having problems, and it was one of our more difficult periods. And I needed to find a way of getting people to come to our website, funnily enough. And at that time, and this is the early days of the internet, in the sense that this is before Facebook, before Twitter, and all this stuff. And a lot of the alternative sort of goth girls, if you like, at that stage, were using a social media thing called Live Journal. A lot of the girls would put stuff on there, and there were a lot of sort of kind of sex sites with goth girls in, with the word gothic sluts, gothic this. There was all kind of, and a lot of the goth girls did put pictures on them, and I don't know what it was. I just decided that we could have a sort of our own section like that on our website that would bring people traffic to the website. So I wrote to some goth girls I knew, and said, look, we're going to have a new section on the website called Satanic Sluts. It just meant ironically, really. And so we did, and amazingly, we got a lot of them, because other girls wrote to us and said, can we, we'd like to be the Satanic Sluts as well. So we had more and more. And then Metal Hammer, which is a big music magazine, said, look, we love your girls. We're going to start an awards thing, which they were called the Golden Globes, I think it was called. And the very first one, they said, oh, can you have your girls come along? So we had, I think I got a lot of the London girls, and they all came along. And it was at that point, the girls sort of said, well, look, nobody knows we're Satanic Sluts. We just look like goth girls. So they wanted a uniform, so we had to design, a look for them.
Well, there we go, the Satanic Sluts and a piece called The Robot. They're just getting themselves organised there. Sure, you'd see more in the Marks & Spencer's lingerie ad, wouldn't you? That's you would, of course. All right, now on Sunday week there will be...
And then things started escalating very, very quickly, because I decided the girls also wanted someone to meet. So we decided, okay, we've got the girls, they've got a look now, they've got a kind of uniform, and so we should give them a nightclub. So I don't quite know how the hell that happened, but we ended up forming Black Mass, which was a nightclub we had once a month, and that had so many problems almost from the word go. I mean, first thing we contacted the Church of Satan, and we were the only company in the world they'd ever done this with, as far as I know. Certainly at the time it was, and they had permission to say it was, endorsed or blessed by the Church of Satan. And then we had to find somewhere that would actually allow us to have a place. And we had a club that somebody I knew, like a private members club called the Green Rooms in Soho, which was like an actors club. And they said we could have Black Mass there every one Sunday a month. And then the guy that owned the buildings heard about it and said, "Oh, we couldn't possibly have it there." And we got banned before we had even started. Because we'd had all the invitations printed and everything done, and the logo was designed. And then they suddenly said no. And then somebody else said, "Oh, don't worry about them. You can have a club, Black Mass, at this." It was called the Astral Bar. It was like a lap dancing club in Soho, and it was quite a sort of posh lap dancing club. And they said we can have it there. And then, literally, I think we were due to open on a Sunday. And I think on the Friday, I got a phone call Friday afternoon from these people saying, "We hear you've got this club. Are the girls going to be? Will there be any nudity there?" That's right. And I remember saying, "I hope so." And then they said, "Well, that's it. You can't have the club." And they just wouldn't budge. They just said no. And by some miracle, I don't know how one of the girls who worked for me ran across the road to a club called Madame Jojo's, which was like a sort of not a gay club, but it had a lot of transvestites there and shows on. And they said, "Oh, we're normally shut on a Sunday, but you can have your club here." So Black Mass opened at Madame Jojo's, and we had two events there, if you like. And the second one, we launched a Church of Satan magazine called Royal Satania. And then one of the girls, I can't go into all the details even now, but one of the girls almost died. They did some stupid thing on stage which went completely wrong, and the ambulances were called, police were called, it was chaos. And we got banned from there. And then we had to enter another club, and there was another incident which I won't go into again, which we got banned. We got banned from there as well. So we were banned from four clubs in 4 venues in 4 over the course of 3 actual Black Mass events, but and one was banned before we even opened. So the Black Mass and the Satanic Sluts were always controversial. And then, of course, in the UK, I'm not sure, we had it happened so fast. One of the girls got involved with Russell Brand, the comedian, the film person. Well, he's made some films, and he went out with Katy Perry for a while. Anyway, one of the girls had an affair with him, and she was also the granddaughter of the man from Fawlty Towers, one of the actors in Fawlty Towers, Andrew Sachs, who played Manuel, and that became a huge story in the British papers. It got talked about in Parliament, and it was just chaos. And it was all because all around the Satanic Sluts and Redemption. And I don't know, the company always seems to get involved in events, I think, is the best, which are usually outside of my control. But it just, things happen, basically. I don't know why.
Okay, so yes, I actually noticed that there are many controversies throughout the history, but it's not intentional.
No, I don't. I mean, it's, as I say, the thing with the girls, it was completely organic. I've never forgotten the Sunday it all exploded, because it was actually on my birthday. And I remember the girls had gone to Vienna, or some of the girls had gone to Vienna to do a show. And this thing with Russell Brand and Jonathan Ross, who's a TV personality in the UK, with one of the girls, was the papers had got hold of it, the Daily Mail newspaper in particular, and were ringing her up to talk to her, and she didn't want to speak to them and said she'll deal with it when she got back. And I remember that Sunday going to get the papers, and the front cover was this story, and it by Monday, I mean, it was just incredible story in the UK. I mean, all the every single paper was talking about the politician. It was just extraordinary. I mean, it was a massive story, and yeah, but it wasn't planned. Nothing was planned.
Yes, and this time it wasn't something that you did. It was some stupid thing that that person did. That
Well, they'd done it, yes, but but in the sense I'd created the Satanic Sluts as such. So you know, they originated from, but I hadn't planned what that was. Just the girls' private life that they were doing, but it was all tied in with the Satanic Sluts and with redemption, you know. And after that, things have been a bit quiet. Well, they've been relatively quiet. I mean, I haven't, but I know that always something happens. You know, there's always things floating around redemption. You know, that's you know, and at the moment I've been working on my own art stuff, and also obviously running the company as well. And obviously the Redemption TV thing is the latest, you know, strand of the things going on around, because we have, you know, we have distribution in America, we have all our Blu-rays and stuff going on over there, we have UK distribution, and because we license the films here and there, and of course Redemption TV is a new thing. So I think it's only been going a few months, so it's early days yet, you know, as to what could happen.
And this story, this controversy with the radio DJ, or how we can call him, it inspired you for Satanic Sluts 3, because I remember that the first scene, it's girls in the newspapers costumes.
Oh yeah, well, yes.
Scandalized.
Scandalized. I mean, that was all. I mean, to be quite honest, that was funded by a UK TV channel called Television X or TVX, and they funded it. And it's actually shot in two forms. There's a hardcore version which they own, which goes on to it's shown on Television X, and we have the softcore version, and which is why they're different. So there is a hardcore version which Television X have, but they funded it, and it was a cash in. And Georgina, who's one of the girls at the centre of the scandal, if you like, she was paid obviously to be in the film. So yes, it was purely because of they wanted a film, you know, to cash in, and so it was some money for redemption. It was it was purely a cash in on what was going on, you know, at the time. It had no other motivation than that.
I didn't came to your planet. You came to my planet. But you're very lucky, because here on my planet everything is much better than where you come from. I'm going to teach you what I'm doing to myself to feel this feeling, the ecstasy, just like that. Then you will bring back your knowledge. You will bring back what I teach you here on my planet, at your planet.
I mean, but what happened up with the Satanic Sluts was after all the press and stuff. A lot of the girls got frightened. I mean, I don't mean frightened like, oh, I'm scared, but they got frightened of the amount of press attention. So a lot of the girls backed away because they didn't want, you know, to be in the papers. Not in that way, you know, certainly not. So the way the Satanic Sluts were as a book. So by that time I had about 250 girls all around the world, and it was getting quite big, and of course it was a vehicle for redemption. But of course, trying to manage, and in a very loose way, I could say that, or a large number of slightly dysfunctional young women, that thing is quite difficult. And having a direction for the Satanic Sluts, because what we weren't like Suicide Girls, which I say is a much bigger project, but the Suicide Girls had a very definite aim, which was essentially a sort of alternative porn, whereas I didn't want that for Satanic Sluts. The idea was it was really for the girls to be a sort of creative force. So we did a Satanic Slut book. We started making videos, and that, after the scandal, if you like, with the BBC and the whole thing, it became easier to start making films with some of the girls. But as a body, it started to fragment a bit, because we just didn't have the resources to, I suppose, exploit it properly. The other thing is, of course, that things change, and the what was right in about 2002, 2003 had become quite different by 2014, that sort of time, So the Satanic Sluts still exist as a concept, as an idea, but I'm not completely sure where it goes from here. We still get, like, if you like, younger generation girls write to me and contact us about, is there anything going on? And it's the making films with them is about the moment is about the only vehicle we can go, but we've got some ideas, put it that way, but it's different from they'll be different from what was gone before. And whether we even use that name, I don't know, because it was meant ironically, but of course, again, the name Sluts and stuff has different connotations now to what it had at the time. So it may be that we do something quite different. We are talking to some girls at the moment. There is something going on, but it's very different from there.
Jack the Ripper. Mary Kelly, is that Jack the Ripper? Mary Kelly, what are you not telling us?
This is the end of the part 1 of the interview with Nigel Wingrove. For part 2 and part 3, check the description to this video. And if the links to them aren't there yet, then I haven't published them yet. And you can subscribe to my email newsletter to be notified about once I publish them. I also use this newsletter to notify my subscribers about new posts on my blog Escapist Advisor, where I post other interviews with actresses and other notable personas, and also articles and things related to exploitation cinema. So I will leave all information in the description to this video. And for now, see you in the next part of the interview with Nigel Wingrove.